Hi, I'm Michelle Begue with a look at what's happening in Latin America now. But first, our news trivia.
What popular Colombian telenovela that became an international hit will have its second season more than 20 years later? We'll have the answer later. We're starting off this week in Europe, and that's only because this week in Brussels, Latin American leaders gathered for a summit between the European Union and CELAC. CELAC is acronym for the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. This is the third summit between these two regional blocs and the first in 8 years. There were high expectations after years of silence. Latin American leaders spoke about climate change, the economy, and security in the region. The EU pledged some 45 billion euros of investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. The United Nations top court dismissed Nicaragua's push to extend its territory beyond 200 nautical miles off the coastline. The decades-long battle with Colombia is over a part of the Caribbean Sea that is abundant with fish and oil. Nicaragua was fighting a 2012 ruling that gave Nicaragua a large chunk of the sea and 7 small islands to Colombia. This time, the International Court of Justice rejected Nicaragua's argument that its territory should follow the continental shelf that extends under the sea from its coastline. The outbreak of a rare disease in Peru has led to the announcement of a national health emergency. This month, the Pan American Health Organization alerted the public to a significant increase in cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's a condition where the immune system attacks the nerves that can lead to paralysis and even death. It's still unclear what is causing the current surge in cases in Peru. Guillain-Barré syndrome is triggered by an acute bacterial or viral infection. Authorities have reported 180 cases in Peru this year. Hundreds in Mexico marched to demand that authorities search for their missing family members. This is in direct response to the July 11th killing of 4 police officers and 2 civilians as they were verifying the possible existence of a secret mass grave. Family members of those who have gone missing are asking authorities to not give up on searching for their loved ones. Last year, the official list of disappeared people surpassed 100,000. It's now up to 112,000.
Now let's go to Mexico with my colleague Baverstock, who has a special report.
After qualifying for the runoff vote, Guatemala's Supreme Court suspended presidential candidate Bernardo Arévalo's political party from participating in the country's 2023 election, while they investigate accusations of electoral fraud. The decision was immediately challenged by the country's Electoral Commission, whose offices were then raided by the Attorney General's office. Protests burst out across the country as demonstrators rallied against what was described as a blatant attempt by the country's political establishment to block a presidential hopeful who has campaigned on tackling corruption. The Supreme Court has lifted its ban on Arévalo's election campaign, and with 5 weeks to go before the vote, the perception of his persecution by Guatemala's political elite may now play in his favor.
Now let's check out what stories we're following for next week.
We're following Colombia's Special Jurisdiction for Peace as they investigate what is famously called the false positive scandals. A recent tribunal says more than 6,400 people were murdered by the army between 2002 and 2008 and passed off as rebels killed in the war. The purpose was to boost the body count to show the military was winning. As the Special Peace Court tries to bring to light what happened during the armed conflict, they'll call high-ranking military officials, ministers, and former President Álvaro Uribe Vélez. They'll all testify, along with former President and then Minister of Defense, Juan Manuel Santos. And now the answer to our news trivia. The answer is B. Betty La Fea, also known as Ugly Betty, ended its 300 episodes back in 2001, but has traveled the world since. It's considered one of the most famous television series in the world, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, reaching 180 countries and translated in 25 different languages with at least 28 adaptations. A major streaming service just announced that it will be bringing in the original cast for a second season that takes place 20 years later.
And that's it for this week. We'll see you again soon on Latin America Now.